You talk about problems, right? This judicial reform sucking up so much the political energy in Israel. And, I'm coming from the United States. I'm seeing that there are bigger problems for Israel and for the world. Let's take China, for example. Israel's so focused on this judicial reform. Are they focused on what's happening in China?
No. In a short, no.
Do you agree with me that maybe
Yes.
it takes an outsider to come here and say, hey, Israelis, you have bigger fish to fry. Let's converse about China. Let's come together to deal with one of the biggest existential threats to the West, to the U.S., and probably to Israel as well. Let's talk about China. Let's get people to focus on what actually matters.
I'm sitting with one of the heads of the Mossad a couple of years ago, and he says, everyone's talking about Iran here, everyone's talking about Hamas and Hezbollah. The thing that keeps me awake at night is China.
Yeah.
And he showed me a map. He showed me a map of the 35 ports that China has acquired around the world, sometimes by lending money to poor governments and then waiting for them to default and then taking over the ports that they built. China now controls the entrance to the Red Sea. They have the largest military base in Djibouti at the entrance to the Red Sea. They are reported to be planning to build 2 new ports on the Persian Gulf. If I were a betting man, I think China will be involved in rebuilding Syria in the next couple of years. The price tag for building Syria is something around $300 billion. The Russians can't do it. The Iranians can't do it. The Chinese can do it. We have China to the north of us. And the Chinese are here. They are building our northern port in Haifa. They're building our northern port in Ashdod.
Who's letting them build here?
We're adding them. My first job in government, when I was the deputy, was to go to the Chinese and ask them politely for 20,000 additional laborers. I got 6, and that was considered a victory.
You have Chinese nationalists working here in Israel?
If you get up in the morning in my neighborhood right here, it looks like Shanghai. There is so many people with little yellow helmets and bicycles. They are building, we say the national bird of Tel Aviv is the crane, right? Half the cranes you see over our horizon here have Chinese signs on them. They are building our subway and keep me awake all night. That subway, you can maybe see a little later, is right across the street from us, our underground system here, built by the Chinese. Chinese build many times faster and much cheaper than any other construction workers in the world. Very quick, So there's a great economic situation. Partially because of that very high natural increase rate in Israel, we are short about 60,000 apartments per year here. And the housing prices are literally, no pun intended, through the roof. And, for a 2-room apartment in Tel Aviv, you could buy a mansion in most places in the United States. And so that ability to build quickly and cheaply is a strategic economic interest. Our ports were built by the British in the 1930s for a population of less than 1 million. Now we're 10 million. And we have to import 90% of our food. So that's also a strategic interest, to build these ports very, very quickly and expand them. But there's a broader strategic geopolitical reason, and that is the Americas pulling out. America's pulling out of the Gulf areas, pulling out of the Middle East, and the Chinese are coming in. And it's very difficult to ignore this. So now I have sat through meetings with 3 administrations, Republican and Democratic alike, and they all had the same message, and that is that they are very angry with us about our relationship with China. And if the Chinese continue to build the Haifa port, the 6th Fleet will not visit Haifa anymore. How about that one? And I've heard the Prime Minister explain all the time, we're going to proceed very delicately, particularly when it comes to, advanced technologies. But there are realities here that the people who run Israel's economy, and even the people who run Israel's military, can't ignore. China, on one hand, has no history of anti-Semitism. We have good relations with China, certainly, and here the Prime Minister is going to China apparently next month. But the Chinese also back our enemies. They vote against us in the UN consistently. They have just signed a $400 billion, 25-year-long treaty with the Iranians that has a military dimension. It's oil for guns. And the Chinese are more like a frenemy. They just are for us. And there's no substitute for the United States as our ultimate ally. No other country shares our values, gives us $4 billion a year in aid, casts the veto against those resolutions that the Chinese are supporting. So we are in that type of bind here.